Okay, so let's get started with our painted cookie portraits. I'm just gonna go ahead and pause the video for a sec. I started with a photo of myself. I sized it up, it's about 5 inches tall on my computer. When I printed it out, I cut around the shape that I wanted, rolled out my dough, placed the picture on top of the dough, cut the cookie shape out, baked it, and now I have it ready for decorating. First thing I'm going to do is turn on my projector and open up that picture on my projector. I'm going to make sure that the photo I've printed out aligns with the image I have projecting onto the cookie so that I know the sizing is all right. It's a little on the big side, so I'm just going to bring the projection a little bit down. Perfect. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flood the face, neck, ears with my skin colored royal icing. I just got distracted by a text message. I opened it up, changed the projector. Sorry. I'm just going to use my scribe to push some of the icing right up against the edge. Pop any bubbles. And now I'm going to leave it about 5 minutes just to start to crust over before I do the hair. Okay, now I'm going to use my dark brown icing to flood the areas where my hair is visible. And I'm just going to add one last little sliver of pink where my dress is. Flooding the skin areas and the hair areas and any clothing areas, you'd like doing this as different color blocks. It's really going to help when you actually get to start painting the picture. One, because it's really hard if I just flooded the whole thing with white icing, it's really hard to paint, to get the skin color right. I find if I just try to paint a skin color with food coloring on white icing, it turns out kind of a horrible shade of corpse gray. So definitely recommend flooding the hair with sort of the base color and the skin with a base color. It's going to make it so much easier. Also helps to align things, since you already have sort of guidelines of where the sides of the face are. Okay, so let your cookie dry overnight or for about 12 hours. You really want the icing to be completely dry through and through. I also recommend when you leave your cookie to dry, put it right in front of a fan. The fan is really going to help give your royal icing a really smooth, shiny finish, and it's much easier to paint on the smooth and shiny finish because it doesn't actually absorb the liquid as fast, so you're less likely to get little potholes and start degrading away at the sugar. First thing I start painting is the whites of the eyes. White, I find, takes a little bit of time to dry, so I do that first. Trace the shapes of the eyebrows and fill them in. It's great just to get the basic shape down. You can always add little brush strokes, details to the eyebrows later on, but shape's quite important. It really makes a face recognizable. Great, eyebrows are filled in. I'm going to start outlining the shapes of my eyes, so just around the white areas. and work my way down the face from there. I like sort of focusing on one section at a time. It makes it feel a little bit more manageable. And at this stage in painting, don't worry about the fine details. You're just going to be copying down the basic shapes of the features. Things like shadows, highlights, we're going to add all of that in later once we take the cookie away from the projector. If you try to paint all the shadows and highlights in while the projector is shining down, it's kind of hard to see, and then you can actually it's pretty easy to make a mistake. And when you're painting on a cookie, there's really not much room for error because you can't erase it. So just go with outlining the basic shapes of the features while you're projecting onto the cookie. I use a little bit of black, and for the black I use activated charcoal mixed with a bit of Everclear grain alcohol, or you can use vodka. I find that using a black food coloring to paint the black details actually fades over time. You end up with kind of a fuzzy looking gray. So I really like using the charcoal. I'm just going to add the nostrils. Don't start outlining features with black. I like to use a very watered down brown. And it's easier to pile up colors and make things darker than it is to make something lighter if you make something too dark. For the mouth, I'm gonna get my teeth white and leave that to dry for a few minutes. At this point, the whites of the eyes are fairly dry, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the irises and the pupils. My eyes are pretty dark brown, so you really can't see a difference in the color that I'm painting here, but leave a little spot in the pupils where you don't put any color for the little bit of shine, and you can add a bit of white on top of that later. Now I'm just using a very watered down brown food coloring. It's very watered down, just to add the shadows underneath my eyebrows, to give my eyes some depth. And I'm just tracing very lightly where other features of my face are. Little, I don't know, what are they called, bags under the eyes, trace that out, sort of lines of the nose. For the lips, go with a darker color than what you would think to use. I'm actually just using like a red food coloring here. I do find it fades, and we're going to use a little bit of white over top of it later to add a bit of shine onto your lips. Great, now you can see that shadows around the eyes are very light. We've just got sort of basic facial features down. And now that I've taken the cookie away from the projector, I've got my guidelines down. It's going to be a lot easier to add in the shadows for the smile creases without making it too dark, because the projector's shining on it, and visibility is compromised a little bit. Again, don't use black while you're tracing sort of the fine lines. It's going to make your face look really harsh. I just like to shade in with a little bit of brown, and you can just continue adding more layers to make it darker. So now I'm going to add the black details to the mouth, just in the corners of the mouth and along the edge of your lips, to just define the teeth and add a little bit of depth to the mouth area. And don't forget to draw a line where your chin is, the jawline. So now that I've got all of my facial features set out and some of the shading started, I'm gonna just basically go to town. Everywhere where I see a little bit of a shadow on my face, I'm just gonna add a little bit of a very watered down brown to recreate that shadow. And as I'm darkening up the shadow, I like to mix a little bit of, just a very tiny bit of activated charcoal in with my very watered down brown food coloring. It just helps accentuate the shadows and it helps the colors from fading. But again, go very, very light because it's really hard to lighten these areas if you make it too dark. Whereas it's always easier to add more color to make it darker. Now that I'm finally happy with how all of the shading is looking, I am actually going to use, oh wait, hold it. You may have noticed a few seconds ago, there was a bit of a funny transition where the cookie kind of cut from one scene to the next and looked kind of different. That would be because I filmed the entire thing all the way through, and then after it was all done, I accidentally deleted a huge chunk of footage, so I had to go back, completely remake a second cookie to refilm that one section. So now I got 2 cookies. Now that I'm finally happy with how all of the shading is looking, I am actually going to use a little bit of black to finally outline the nostrils, a little bit of the crease of my smile, to really bring the features out. And I'm gonna do a little drop of white in my eyes to really make them look sparkly. For highlights, that's the very last step. Once everything else is dry, I use a little bit of white food coloring and I just paint it on in very thin layers. In the same way that I would do contouring on my face if you've ever watched a YouTube video for facial contouring. On the cheekbones, on the nose, a little bit on the chin, sort of around the jawline, on the forehead. And it helps, again, add a lot of dimension to your face. It makes it look a lot more 3D. Try not to get the white food coloring anywhere where you've added shadows. It will eventually turn gray if you start painting white over areas that have the charcoal in it. For the lines in the teeth, I do a very, very faint black line. Teeth are so impossible to dry. You don't want it to be crazy, crazy harsh. Just very, very faint lines. And I'll finish myself off with adding shadows to my neck. And now that I'm satisfied with how that's all looking, I'm going to move on to the hair. I start by adding highlight areas to the hair. So I'll add brush strokes with a little bit of white mixed in with a little bit of brown just to make it a lighter shade of brown. And once I've done that, for areas where shine is, I'm going over it again to add the low lights with a little bit of black for shadowed areas of my hair. Now as I'm painting the hair, I got a spot of black on the side of my face here. Don't freak out if that happens. You can take it away by wait for it to kind of dry and just use a clean brush dipped in a little bit of alcohol, and you're just gonna rub it with your brush very, very, very gently until it kind of just blends into a shadow. I even like to keep around a paper towel or a clean tea towel just to blot areas if I put too much water and I don't want it to continue to sit on the icing and degrade it. So just use a little paper towel just to blot up wet spots very gently. And don't forget to add the small hairs, a little bit of texture around the hairline. Nobody's hairline is as harsh as that royal icing one is. So we're just gonna add in a little bit of detail so it looks like I've got little baby hairs around my face. And I'm done. And I'm just gonna finally add in the little bits of jewelry that I have on, earrings and my necklace, and I'll paint those silver later once the icing is dry. And there you go.